for my Wi-Fi to, there it goes, we're good to go. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another session, Breaking Into Data. I'm Aaron Falus, founder of Promotable and also your host for tonight's event. Before we jump in, just a couple of quick announcements. So at Promotable, we're a workforce accelerator that closes data skill gaps. And of course, how do we do that? I see a lot of familiar people in the audience who have heard this spiel before, but bear with me. Of course, we do events like this where we bring you experts, so you can actually ask all the questions you can't get from a book or a class. Really, we want to teach you or just really kind of show you how it is. And so we do stuff like this. We have coming up, we have someone from LinkedIn talking about insights. And then after that, in April, we also have a senior data scientist from Walmart Labs talking about portfolios. So if anyone wants to learn more about those kinds of things, check out our Eventbrite page and sign up for that. And also, we are also launching our immersive data science bootcamp. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about that, feel free to send me an email, aaron@promotable.io, or go to the website, www.learndata.co, and dive in. That's 15 weeks full-time, taught by current data scientists, of course. We have mentorship with folks who, kind of like Sarah, who are all in our mentor network, all our speaker network. And of course, it's all wrapped in Teach 71. And of course, we have our capstone projects with our partner companies. So those are all going to be growth stage companies. And really, we want to be able to get you in the room and connect you with, learning with the real world. So that said, welcome, Sarah. Thanks for coming. Sarah Scheik, she is the Director of Product at Backbone.ai. She's had senior roles at other really huge companies, so I'm not going to dive too into it, but I know Hudson's Bay, Viacom, a few others. So really cool, deep experience. I think this is going to be a really great event. Sarah, off to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Scheik. I've been in product management for about 10 years now. As Aaron mentioned, I worked at a few different companies, a lot of them big brand names. I've worked in the media space quite a bit. So Hearst, CBS, HBO, a lot of broadcast media, and then digital online media as well, including Hearst and Ziff Davis. Ziff Davis, for most of you who are not familiar, owns Mashable, PC Mag, Extreme Tech, Geek. So our brands are much more well-known than we are. I've also worked in e-commerce. Before Backbone AI, I was Director of Data and Analytics at Hudson's Bay, which is the parent company for Saks off Fifth, and Hudson's Bay, which is a Canadian e-commerce giant. I currently work at Backbone AI. We are in the data automation space, and our current focus is on industrial supply chain data. Our platform is AI powered. And that is sort of the focus of my talk today, which is AI product management, how to get started, and what are some of the first steps that you can do if you want to transition into an AI product management role. Okay, so this is my first time using AirMeet. So please bear with me if I run into issues in terms of forwarding slides or anything else. Just kind of giving you guys a heads up. So let's see. How do I oh, this is interesting. Okay. So I guess I have to move between tabs. There we go. Okay. So at the start of the conversation, I kind of want to, start with Professor Andrew Ng. Anyone who works in the field of AI, applied AI, or even is remotely interested in AI has heard of Professor Andrew Ng. He's considered one of the leading thought leaders in the space. And, I just kind of want to emphasize how important AI is kind of moving forward, because Professor Ng actually refers to AI as the new electricity. So when he says AI is the new electricity, what does he really mean by this? So from his perspective, and he's done a lot of talks, you can look them up on YouTube, but from his perspective, AI is the fourth industrial revolution. So when we think about the industrial revolution, we have the first industrial revolution, which is steam-based machines, and that is kind of what started, what kicked off the industrial revolution in the first place. People could travel across the country, they could travel globally, goods could be transported from one place to another. Then kind of moving on, we have the second industrial revolution, which is electrical, and that enabled mass production, mass distribution of products. Moving on, the third industrial revolution, which is computer and internet based knowledge. And then finally, now we're so the third industrial revolution around computers is generally considered to be the era of the 1980s, the personal computer, Mac and PC. And now we're inherently in the start of the fourth industrial revolution, which is artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, cloud, and blockchain. So, just to kind of reemphasize, AI from this point onwards is going to have an increasingly bigger role in how products are built. It's a skill set, at least from my perspective, that every product manager is going to have to learn and pick up sooner or later. So again, here what we're looking at is a few different AI use cases by industry. So a lot of times when I talk to fellow product managers or people from other cross-functional teams, there has been conversation around, okay, AI is, something that Google or Amazon or Facebook or any of the, tech players need to use, but it doesn't really have an application in other industries. So as you can see here, if you look at manufacturing, if you look at retail, healthcare and life sciences, travel and hospitality, financial services, energy, feedstock and utilities, some of the biggest industries in the US, there are a lot of different applications of AI in all of these different verticals. So in my case, I've worked in media and I've worked in retail, and now I'm in industrial supply chain data. What I can tell you is that you would be surprised at how many use cases there are in these three very different industries. And there is a little bit of overlap in terms of, are you building something that is going to recommend something? Are you building something that is going to predict something? Are you building something that is going to cluster something? So at a very abstract level, the use cases are even similar. Obviously, when you come down to it and you think through what are the different workflows in a media company versus a manufacturing company, the workflows are very different, and then the application of AI is very different. But at a very high level, there are applications in every industry. Okay, so again, I kind of wanted to re-emphasize this point, that if you look at trends in AI, One of the reports that I found recently was this McKinsey Global Survey on, I think this is what the title of the report was, the impact of AI on industry. It basically showed that from 2018 to now, there's been a 25% year-over-year increase in the use of AI in standard business processes. So if you were at a certain company in 2018, chances were that, especially if you were at a big corporation, chances were that maybe one department was kind of toying around with an applied AI use case. Maybe there was some conversation around, do we hire a data science team? If we do hire them, how do they add value? What are they going to work on? Is it going to be more experimental, where they're going to try to figure out what the application is? Or is there, a use case that we have in mind? So there was a lot of conversation around AI and if it was relevant to, whatever the company was that you were working at in 2018. However, in 2021, there's been a 25% year-over-year increase. And as you can see, 44% of the companies or the departments that have applied AI say that it has reduced costs for them. So just kind of wanted to point out this statistic, for everyone's reference. Okay, this screen, I apologize upfront. It's really tiny. I tried to fit it on a slide, and this is the best I could do. But basically, if you really focus and look at the infographic, you can see that it's kind of showing you the different AI capabilities or categories that are most commonly applied across different industries. So as you can see, a lot of high-tech companies are using robotic. So I'm just going to kind of go through high-tech because it's going through a bunch of different industries, but high-tech, automotive, telecom, travel, financial services, consumer packaged goods. These are some of the industries on this infographic. And, in terms of the most commonly applied AI capabilities or AI categories, we have robotic process automation, we have computer vision, we have machine learning, we have natural language text understanding, conversational interfaces, physical robotics, natural language generation, speech understanding, and autonomous vehicles. So at, again, 30,000 feet, we can kind of see, what direction AI is trending in and what are the different types of AI capabilities that are being rapidly adopted throughout the top 10, top 20 industry verticals in the country. Okay, so my basic thesis is, based on all of the data that I've shared so far, that sooner or later, if you're working as a product manager, if you're working as an engineer, obviously that's not as relevant to my career, but if you're working in the technology side of things, you are sooner or later going to work on a product that is AI powered. And it is going to happen within the next 5 years, even if it's not happening now. And the biggest takeaway is that if you are a product person and you end up working on an AI powered product and you don't understand how to, figure out a use case, or if it's something that's already been implemented, what are the maintenance costs? What do you need to do in terms of maybe deployment? How do you estimate return on investment for your senior executives, it's going to hinder your career growth, because you will find yourself in a position, in an unenviable position of not being able to explain the value add of what your AI product is, or you are going to basically not be able to maintain something that already exists, and you need to own it and you need to maintain it. So in order to set up your career for success in the, over the next few years and also in the long term, I think becoming AI literate and becoming data literate is essential. Because when we talk about artificial intelligence or machine learning, which are interchangeably used today, we also have to keep in mind that now, since everything is online, we are generating increasing amounts of data every year. So inherently, the combination of data generation, so much data that no human being can kind of look through it and parse through it and gain insights from it. And all of these machine learning tools, machine learning systems, AI-powered applications, this is a combination that requires, knowledge and insight and experience starting today. So I hope I'm not coming off as too much of an alarmist, but I really think everyone who works in product management, engineering, really needs to, start getting educated on these topics if they aren't already. Okay, so, all of us have heard the term AI being kind of thrown around quite a bit. And I think, at a very high level, what is AI? What is machine learning? What is deep learning? How do they kind of tie together, right? So the abstract definition for AI, the best abstract definition for AI that I've heard, is that AI is any kind of machine that perceives its environment and takes action based on that and then improves over time, right? So that is a very abstract definition, saying a machine that can learn from its environment. Now, machine learning, when we say machine learning, that is more focused on, at least from what I've noticed, on models. So when you talk about machine learning, you're talking about classification, regression, prediction, clustering, and these are all kind of statistics based models that improve with more and more data inputs. So, and then deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which is very, very focused on neural networks. So, here at this stage, when we talk about machine learning or AI powered products, they are quite interchangeable. People use them interchangeably. I think the important thing to remember is that whenever we talk about an AI-powered product, there is an underlying model where there's a certain amount of data input, a certain amount of extraction, insights from that model, and then some sort of an output. And that's kind of what AI is at a very high level. Okay, so speaking a little bit more about machine learning. Machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence. It's focused on building applications that learn from data, improve their accuracy over time without being programmed to do so. So actually, this is an important point to remember, which is that there is no explicit programming in machine learning. The learning is from additional data over time. The improvement comes from that. Okay, so here I wanted to talk a little bit about engineers and when they are onboarding onto an AI powered product. So I've developed a few different, I worked on a few different AI powered solutions. So during my time in media, one of the things that I worked on was a content recommender system. When I worked in e-commerce, the product that I worked on was focused heavily on reducing churn rate. So kind of taking data from our online store, looking at data from our brick and mortar stores, creating customer profiles, and then kind of predicting who is going to churn, and then what are some of the things that we can do to ensure that they don't churn? What are some offers? What are some perks? What can we do to make sure that the customer doesn't churn? And then now currently I'm working on a data automation platform. I'm not really going to go into too much detail on what we do in terms of our AI powered solution, but inherently we apply AI in data extraction, data assessment in terms of what the data quality is, and then not so much in data delivery, but that's also something that we've been thinking about. So there are different use cases, and when engineers who come from a traditional programming mindset onboard onto an AI-powered product, usually their question is, why do we need to use AI? We can write code to solve this exact problem. So I think as the product person, it is part of our job to make the case for why a use case belongs with an AI solution or a model as opposed to traditional programming. So one of the things that I share with the team usually is, at a very high level, this is how AI differs from traditional programming, which is in traditional programming, you have some information, you write a piece of code, and that delivers the answer, right? As we sort of discussed a little bit earlier, in machine learning, you have the same three areas of focus, but the order is a little bit changed up. So you still have piece of information, which is normally a much more complex piece of information that you're used to in traditional programming. So you have your input, then you have your machine learning model, which is sitting kind of between the input and the output. And then the machine learning model is parsing and spitting out the output. So instead of handcrafting code every time for every situation or every edge case that arises, we just have the machine learning model in the middle, which improves with more and more input. This slide that you guys are looking at currently is Cassie, what's her name? Cassie Ozerkoff. She is the chief decision scientist at Google. She has a lot of really wonderful, really insightful presentations online. So I highly recommend that you guys check her out if you're interested in learning more about how does traditional programming differ from machine learning, and if you want to learn more about how to explain some of these machine learning concepts very, very simply. Okay, so this is what we're looking at here is what are the most common use cases for machine learning? What can machine learning do, right? And these are some of the examples. So if there is a photo, for example, what machine learning can do is give you a yes or no, right? Are there human faces in it? Yes or no? Photo tagging. Will they repay the loan? Yes or no? Will a user click an ad? Yes or no? So we're sort of classifying each picture, each loan activation application, each ad plus user information, and saying, from a classification perspective, where is this person going to land? Where is this loan application going to land? Where does this picture land? Then audio clip, right? Transcript of an audio clip, which is natural language processing, speech recognition. English sentence to French sentence, language translation again. And then sensors from hard disk, plain engine, etc. Is it about to fail? This is more predictive, where it's saying, yes, given these conditions, it is going to. There's a 80% chance of failure. There's a 20% chance of failure. There's a 90% chance of failure. And then car camera, other sensors, position of other cars, which is autonomous vehicles, autonomous driving. I don't have much experience with autonomous driving or self-driving cars, but there is a wonderful, wonderful course by Sebastian Thrun on self-driving cars. So if any of you are interested in learning more about how self-driving cars work, please do look him up. He's also done a few different videos on YouTube that are very, very helpful. But at a very high level, kind of recapping this slide, there's classification problems that you can solve with machine learning. There are prediction problems that you can solve with machine learning. There are language, use cases that you can work on with machine learning. Okay. So I think now that we've talked a little bit about what are the trends in AI, why is it important, and what are its different applications as it pertains to different industries. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you can do if you're interested in moving out of product management and transitioning into a more AI-focused product management role. I don't know if we can. So again, I'm not that familiar with AirMeet, but I wanted to have a slightly interactive question here where I wanted to ask everyone in the audience if they could guess what was common between a product designer and an AI product manager. Aaron, is there a way to see the answers?
So unfortunately, the polling feature only has yes, no, but if folks want to throw their answer in the chat, we can take it from there.
Okay. So let's, I guess in that case, I'm just going to jump ahead. The answer is very, very simple. A product designer and an AI product manager both need portfolios. So you need a portfolio of work to show that these are some of the different things that you've worked on. Okay. So my next slide is, okay, if we need to build a portfolio of work, what are some of the different things that we can do, right? So for anyone who's new to AI product management, I highly recommend that you start with Coursera. There's a very, very simple course there. It's free. It's called AI for Everyone. And it sort of lays out, the lay of the land. So it introduces you to the concept. It introduces you to fundamental ideas around AI, I would start there. Then if you're working in an industry, my second piece of feedback would be to research pain points for that industry. Really understand, if the industry is going through a change. For example, during COVID, a lot of different industry verticals were impacted. Supply chain was impacted. E-commerce and retail were impacted. There, the food industry was impacted. So obviously, this is a weird time in the history of the world, but in any given year, there are different forces or trends that impact the industry and cause disruption. So I would recommend really understanding and research the pain points that the industry that you're interested in is facing today or this year or within the next 6 months. Another thing that I recommend doing is checking out experimentswithgoogle.com. It has a collection of different AI-focused experiments, very insightful and very useful to kind of build a mindset around how to think about AI problems. Again, like I've said a few different times, AI usually is about the input, feeding it to a model, looking at the output, maybe tweaking, maybe applying, maybe adding the same data set to a new model, looking at the accuracy from the new model. So in order to get a data set, one of the simplest things to do is scrape data. There's a lot of scraping tools that are free to use that anyone can pick up and kind of start scraping. If that seems a little intimidating, Kaggle.com has a bunch of free data sets that you can pick up. You can also pick up a bunch of pre-trained models on ModelZoo. Take the data set from Kaggle, enter it into one of the models on ModelZoo, look at the output, and kind of build an understanding of, okay, how do these models work? How do we train them? What does the data look like? If I use a different data set, what is the output then? Just really get, your hands dirty and get a feel for what it feels like to work with an AI model. There's also another course on Kaggle, which is Intro to Machine Learning, also a fabulous resource to kind of pick up basic skills. Google has a bunch of APIs. They have their AutoML APIs, which again are pre-trained, and you can enter data sets and get outputs. And then, it kind of ranges from that to TensorFlow, which is their custom ML tool, which I would not recommend starting with, but kind of building up to that and, getting a sense of, okay, what can I do with AutoML? What is the data that I can input, and what is the output for different data sets into the same model? So these are some of the things that you can do. You can also work on a side project. So for example, if someone wanted to work on predicting how the pandemic impacted apartment prices in New York City, that's something that you could do on the side. If you wanted to kind of take some public data set and cluster it to see, what the trends are. So for example, take a data set, and I'm going to use New York City again because I live here. I know that we have a lot of public APIs in terms of data sets. So if you wanted to take data from, 1991 and then cluster it, and then take a data set from 2019 before the pandemic and kind of see, what are the different clusters that are emerging? What were the trends in 91 versus 2019? That's a different kind of side project that you can work on. Again, lots of models on Model Zoo, whatever you find interesting. And finally, another thing you can do is wherever you work, you can advocate for an AI initiative at work. If you really, kind of going back to step 2, if you really research the pain points in your industry, chances are that you can come up with a good use case. And if you really played around with different pre-trained models, chances are that you can plug in some data and show some output, but pitch together to show why it may be a good idea to invest in an AI initiative. Okay, I'm kind of going to skip over this because I feel like we're running out of time. But since I worked in retail, I'm very, very familiar with all of these different use cases in retail. I kind of wanted to highlight, what are some of the different things that you can think about when you're thinking about applied AI in e-commerce or retail. So sentiment analysis, churn prediction, demand prediction, personalized offers, fraud detection, all of these things, very, very relevant. Okay, so what is AI product management, right? So I think the starting point is Product Management 101, which is the jobs to be done framework. Regardless of whether you're building a product that is AI powered or not, if it's a more traditional product, you always start with who your customer is, what is the problem domain, what are their needs, what do they use today as a solution, and what would be the core value prop of our product, what is our growth or North Star metric. So Product 101 does not go away simply because we're working on an AI powered solution. These are still our basic fundamental questions to ask and answer before we can move on to building an AI product. Okay. Now, what is a little bit different, or what is a new add-on, is, kind of identifying the applied AI use case. So when I say what is a viable ML use case, again, viability, desirability, and feasibility. We're still looking at all of those things. But when we say viable, we also mean viable from an operational standpoint, right? So when you're thinking about an AI solution, what are your system's outputs and why are they worth it for your customer or end user or internally for your organization, right? Do you have the data needed for training, for validation, for testing? Because if you don't have the data, that's a non-starter. Do you have access to hardware? So do you have a cloud account? Do you have access to GPUs? Where are you going to run your model and process the inputs and the outputs and store them? How is that going to work, right? And then do you have the engineering resources? Because you will have to set up a pipeline. You will have to figure out the AI model. How is it going to integrate with the front end, with your platform or your app or your product or your website? And you will have to figure out deployment. So, how often are you checking your model for freshness? How often is it outputting the results? What is the pipeline? Where is everything stored? How is it, appearing on the front? So all of these questions need to be kind of thought through upfront and answered before you kick off an AI powered solution at work. And then, as a product manager, again, what are your metrics for success? So when you're using a machine learning model, 95% accuracy is amazing. I mean, it's not trivial, but a lot of times if you go to, the senior executive team and say, well, 95% of the time I can classify correctly, or I can predict correctly if if a customer is going to churn, or if the data label is correct. That may not be good enough. So there are certain use cases where 95% accuracy is acceptable. There are use cases, for example, fraud detection, where 95% accuracy is absolutely not acceptable. So then you kind of have to think through your metrics. Okay, is accuracy my top metric? Is recall my top metric? Is precision my top metric? Does the model that I'm pitching, or my data science team is pitching, is it good enough to launch? So a lot of times there's this sunk fallacy, thinking where sunk cost fallacy, right? Where you're thinking, oh, we spent 3 months building out this model, or 3 weeks, or whatever, and now we have to launch it. I think, again, we need to do a little bit of upfront work, sit with the data team, really understand what are we launching, how accurate is it going to be, and does it work for our use case or not. So that's it from me. I hope I was able to add to your understanding of AI product management. You can find me on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can look for me by name. Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we've already got a few questions. For everyone else, feel free to either raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and invite you to the stage, or continue to use the question section over here, and we will get to all your questions as soon as they come in. One question came from Kita. I'm sorry if I'm butchering something here, but she asked if those courses you mentioned for non-technical PMs, if they're suitable for someone who's non-technical. I assume like the Coursera course and some of the other ones.
So I'm sorry. So the question is if the courses that I recommended are appropriate for someone who's non-technical.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So absolutely. I got a lot out. For example, the AI for Everyone course. It is a very, very basic course, and it's an introduction to AI and how it can be used within an organization. So it's not meant to be technical. I've also taken Professor Andrew Ng's Coursera course, which is I've forgotten the title of the course. That one, and I can actually quickly Google it. That is very, very technical, and so I understand if there is some hesitance, because that I think it's called How to Use Machine Learning. I don't remember off the top of my head.
That's okay.
But that course walks you through the statistical models that underlie a lot of ML models that are commonly used. AI for Everyone is very abstract and conceptual. There is no statistics. There is no mathematics.
Got it. Awesome. And then Ron just asked, how involved should the PM be in the architecture of an AI development, or AI deployment, rather?
So it depends on the size of your organization. Currently, I'm at a startup. We're 30 people in the org. We don't have an architect on the team. So I am involved on a daily basis in conversations around infrastructure, pipeline, hosting, and deployment. Having said that, if I was at a bigger company, I most probably would not be in every conversation. But I think in order to make intelligent trade-offs, as a product person, you do need to know what the different components of your deployment are.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And then Mark asked, how technical does an experienced PM in tech need to be to work with an AI product? Do they have to learn to code like Python or NumPy, same thing, but also, or do you just need to understand the applications at a higher level?
So I think as a product person, you don't need to come from a technical background per se, but since you work with the engineering team so closely, it's good to understand, again, what are the different trade-offs at times. So for me specifically, earlier in my career, I took front-end development classes, which really helped, even though you're looking at CSS, HTML, and JavaScript, which is not very technical. I've also taken a few Python classes, which again really help when you're looking at something, that is more back-end focused. I don't think there needs to be extensive knowledge. You can take a Python weekend workshop, and that's enough because, again, it introduces you to the concepts. For AI specifically, you do not need to know coding. You just need to understand what the use cases are. And like I said, if it makes sense to deploy a model for whatever your product is.
Awesome. What about kind of follow off on that? What would you say like the biggest either like mistakes you see people make when they're thinking about either transitioning to work on like a technical product or an AI based product? We'll start with that.
So I think the biggest mistake I see people make when they're starting on an AI product, at least, is that they feel that they really need to understand the underlying math and statistics of a model. But if you are in product management, again, you are the voice of the customer. So it's more about the outcome, as opposed to, it's more about the use case and more about the outcome than it is about, mathematically, how does this model compute the result that it does.
Yeah, I think that across the board and almost anything data related
Exactly.
is like one of the pain points I think that we see, which is we get lost in like the minutia and forget kind of where we started in the first place. One other question from one of the previous folks. You mentioned an auto ML tool for folks who are trying to learn. Is that something that is a free product or
it used to be free. Google used to give out 300 credits.
On a Google, yeah.
Yeah, so it was on GCP. I don't know if it's free. I mean, I see that it still says try it free.
Yeah.
But I haven't used it in about 2-3 years.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I think most whether it's Google, Azure, they'll give you something for free. You just have to watch out that you don't do something stupid
Exactly.
and end up with a huge bill. I've heard some horror stories. In terms, someone just asked a question about just more use cases for AI from products specifically. I think you had that slide. I mean, you came from media, so maybe dive into the stuff you know best.
Sure. So for use cases for AI, there's a few different ways that you can look them up. So for example, the slides that I shared, I think they were from McKinsey. So McKinsey has like a few different reports that they generate and they'll share online, and there's not behind a paywall, so you can kind of go in, Google it, look for them. But personally, for me, the thing that's really been helpful, especially in media and in retail, here we have a very specific mandate. We're focused on a very specific product at Backbone, right? Because we are an AI first company. But when I worked in media or in retail, we were trying to fit AI into an existing org structure. So the products that we had built were not AI first. Here it is AI first, so it's easier. So I think really understand what your organization is struggling with. Is it churn? Is it, trying to predict something? Is it trying to increase audience? And the way that I landed on our content recommender system at one of the media companies that I worked at was that, we had a lot of traffic coming in to our website. And we had, how you have like a view next widget at the bottom of the story. So even if our scroll depth was 90% and people were scrolling all the way down, our engagement rate with our next widget was 0.2%. So nobody was clicking on that next story, and people didn't find it relevant. And one of the biggest reasons was our content recommendation widget was based on demographic segmentation. So it was not individualized to each customer or each audience member. It was just dropping each audience member into this huge target segment and assuming that everyone is going to be interested in the same thing. So when we rolled out our content recommender system, we basically made the content recommender widget personalized for each audience member by looking at their interest and the last 25 stories they had consumed and the keywords that they were interested in. So that increased it was not a huge jump, but it increased our engagement from 0.2% to, single digits. I don't remember anymore, but it was like 7% and above. So in terms of, 10xing, we got there in terms of absolute percentages. It wasn't a big deal. But it's usually understanding what your pain points are. What can you improve at the place that you're working at?
And then kind of touching on that as well, because you've had, obviously now you're at a smaller startup, you've worked for huge companies. When you're in product, what's like I don't know if there's what the big differences or like, what are some of like the common differences because I'm sure there's a lot of folks who are applying at like Series A, Series B type companies, and then there's like you're working at Caterpillar, like it's a very different kind of everything.
So in I think in product at a larger company, you move a little bit slower, and you don't really focus on funding. It's more, either increasing, usually the goals are either increase audience or increase revenue, right? Or figure out new monetization strategies. In media, it's very, very common to focus quite a bit on improving or increasing revenue and increasing audience. So I think going from B2C to B2B, there's one difference there because you have the customers you have to serve them better. Whereas at B2C companies, growth is a big factor in how you approach product. So there's that. And then a smaller startup versus a big corporation. At a bigger corporation, roadmaps are a living document, but once you communicate them outwards among a lot of different cross-functional teams and you have stakeholder buy-in for at least a few months, your roadmap is kind of blocked. Startups are nimble. Things change very quickly. A lot is reliant on your next round of funding. So things move a lot faster.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And the last question, someone asked, about working with your technical teams, your data science teams, or engineering teams. Like, what's you have any tips for either building trust or rapport, or just really being able to kind of get on their level and make sure you're able to see things eye to eye?
So that's a good question. I think for me personally, I work on the human relationship. I like to get to know people and build a rapport one-on-one as a person. In terms of the work that we do, right? So I'm technical enough, but obviously I don't come from. I've never been an engineer. And I am a woman. I mean, I don't, so there is a certain level of skepticism when I walk into a room initially to see me, and maybe people assume I don't know that much in terms of being technical. So my advice there would be to, for example, if you're using BERT, right, as your underlying model for your data, look up BERT, learn about BERT, understand how it works, and be able to have an intelligent conversation with your team about the model that we're using. So I would say continuous learning is one of the keys. Understand their jobs, empathize with their work and what they're trying to achieve and what their goals are, and then kind of map it to what you're trying to achieve for the customer or for the company, and build that trust that you're aligned and you're building towards the same thing, and you understand how technically the lay of the land works.
Awesome. Well, it's all we have time for today. But thanks for attending, everyone. Please, you'll see the event next week. We already posted it, and thereafter, definitely come back. Click the like button if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn. Always appreciate it. And of course, feel free to hang out afterwards and connect with everyone and say hello. Always love when we get to follow up and chat with everyone. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, everyone.